A good listener was the most enduring phrase on my school report cards. I was quiet, punctual, and obedient. Many of the teachers largely forgot about my presence in the classroom since I caused no trouble. It's ironic that this reoccurring summation of my character missed something. Certainly, I was a good listener, but only because that allowed me to be a much better observer, specifically of other people, and mostly without them even noticing. If anyone had bothered to ask, I could have listed every habit of Kari Pearson, the girl who sat 2 desks away, or provided a comprehensive psychological profile of my teacher, Mrs. Rollins, although that would have been very much from a child's perspective. After I left high school, I started studying to become a psychologist. I must confess my choice of study was an exercise in academic curiosity right from the start, rather than being born of any great desire to help people. You can't observe humankind as keenly as I already had without realizing how nasty and self-absorbed most of us are. I wasn't sure that any amount of analysis was going to solve that problem. But as I honed my skills of observation to a wicked edge, I noticed him. If you have ever tried not to be noticed, you'll know how difficult it is. You try to quieten your breathing, stop fidgeting, and keep your eyes down so that nobody around you has that prickly feeling of being watched. But where most people go wrong is by trying to hide rather than simply staying unnoticed. And these are very different things. Hiding is active, not passive, and best done behind or beneath something, where only sound or movement will really give you away. The key to not being noticed is to be so ordinary that other people's minds skip right over you. I describe my jacket as not quite grey. Perhaps it's faintly brown, or perhaps it is vaguely blue. In different lights, it seems to shift to reflect the surroundings. The cut is somewhere between blazer and business, but truly neither. With it goes a blouse that is a lighter grey with a hint of cream, but not pale enough to draw the eye. My knee-length skirt is the same colour as the jacket, and my shoes are flat and serviceable. This nondescript ensemble, combined with shoulder-length brown hair and glasses with gunmetal frames and a naturally forgettable face, allowed me to feel I had mastered the art of blending in. I bought my coffee every day at the same cafe, and the barista always asked for my name. My doctor had to remind himself of who I was whenever I visited, flipping through my short file. Other students barely registered my presence, and I didn't have any friends, but that suited me fine. I knew everything about my peers already, picking up the nuances of their personalities when they thought they were unobserved, and that left me with little desire to become closer to any of them. In an odd way, I felt I was more connected to humanity than anyone else around me, almost overloaded with the sheer amount of social and emotional information that saturated the air. I wondered sometimes if this was how a telepath would feel, except instead of social cues, it would be direct thoughts constantly bombarding you with no ability to shut them out. Indeed, if I observed someone long enough, I could even begin to predict their behavior, even their speech patterns, to a point where I could mouth their responses to myself with enough accuracy that it would probably scare some people. So I kept that to myself. Sometimes I sought out more isolated places, but there are few of those within the churn of an overcrowded city. Mostly, I found solace in my invisibility. As I said, not being noticed is an art form of carefully curated banality, of doing things so predictably ordinary that other people simply don't register you. People are bad at remaining unobserved because at the most primitive level, they want to be noticed. The ego, whether large or small, needs attention from fellow primates. It's so instinctive that you're not even aware of it. You want to make your mark on this world. You want to leave it changed for everyone else, simply because you exist. Our monkey brains are constantly screaming, "I was here," into the void. When you sit in a cafe nursing your chai-spiced whatever with your double cream something, you hope that you're drinking it in a way that makes you look cool to the redhead near the counter. You chose that particular beverage only because you think it's a little bit unique, and that might make you special somehow, maybe just a little bit better than other people around you. Your shoes are red, You've forgotten you're wearing them, but you didn't choose them because they're comfortable or durable. You chose them because you think they look good, that they make a statement. They complement and/or enhance some other feature or item of clothing. I digress, but my point is this: everyone wants to be noticed a little. Everyone wants to be remembered. So when I noticed the man, it was during one of those very rare moments when his absorbed humanity betrayed him. It must have been only for an instant and not really long enough to register anywhere but in my subconscious. I left the cafe still processing everything I had seen, mentally making notes as I always did. When I got home, I liked to catalogue things digitally, to type up my thoughts about people, to assist me in my analysis of humankind. My fingers faltered on the keyboard as I almost remembered something, and then instantly lost the thread. Reading back, I followed the chain. Then my mind stumbled for an instant, as though there was a tiny gap in the train of thought, like a half-remembered smell or colour from childhood. Concentrating, I forced a more detailed replay, remembering the chatter as I observed the cafe. Two teenage boys talking excitedly about a computer game, one clearly lying about his exploits, the other doubting him but not wanting to challenge his friend. And then, in my mind's eye, I saw it. It was a silhouette of a man, sitting at one of the tables, but colourless and two-dimensional. He wore a hat and a suit jacket, but I could discern no other details. A flat man. So non-existent, so unnoticeable, that even my carefully trained senses couldn't register him completely. A frisson of excitement tinged with fear thrilled up my spine. I had to find out who he was, what he was. I watched and I waited, surreptitiously scanning the cafe while remaining as banal and uninteresting as I could. I went back day after day, hoping to see him again, to catch a glimpse of the flat man. As weeks rolled past, I couldn't find him. I began to doubt myself. Perhaps it was an anomalous memory, some minor glitch in my brain. No, I knew I had seen something. Other possibilities presented themselves as I aimlessly scanned a newspaper, turning the pages just at the right speed and volume to draw neither positive nor negative attention. What if he had noticed me noticing him? After all, he was clearly much, much better at this than I was. Perhaps he had simply stopped coming to the cafe and decided to move on rather than risk discovery. And if he was gone, if he had moved on, I would probably never see him again in my life. Nobody that good at hiding in plain sight could be chanced upon randomly. Or was he so good at being socially invisible that he was here, right now, but even I couldn't detect him? And then it hit me, with such obviousness and clarity that I almost laughed. No matter how good he was at hiding from human eyes, surely the man couldn't escape cameras. My phone was on the table, an essential tool for blending in. Neither a new model or an old one, it had default sounds, default screens, and default apps. I didn't take photos often, and I fumbled with the settings until I found the panorama shot. Lifting the phone, I dragged it through the air, getting as much of the cafe in the shot as possible. Predictably, a couple of people felt the gaze of the lens pass over them. Postures changed, faces subconsciously rearranged themselves, but they were not noticing me. They were noticing themselves being noticed, immortalized. I closed the camera app and left the cafe. If the flat man was there, surely I would have caught him. Back at home, I pulled the image up on my laptop. The details of the cafe were crisp and bright. Humans caught like statues, mid-mouthful or halfway through the bathroom door, those few faces turned towards the camera. It was a large metropolitan cafe, often boasting 50 customers at a time, so looking through the image was like trying to solve one of those Where's Wally posters on the roof of your dentist's office. But this Wally was one that you had never seen before. I knew all the regulars, so I quickly discounted them, moving on to people who were new or infrequent customers. Each was ordinary in their specialness, none of them betraying any hint they might be my flat man. As I pored over every pixel, growing increasingly frustrated, I realized that this was less a Wall-E picture than one of those magic eye images that was so popular in the 90s. Scrolling around, I let my mind unfocus, not seeing the individual shapes as people and faces, but rather perceiving them just as colors and edges, as a generalized mass disconnected from their humanity. And there he was. It wasn't like those sci-fi movies with poorly done CGI, where the person is invisible but the digital distortion betrays them. It was more like very skilled body art. The subject painted so perfectly to resemble a tree or a supermarket shelf that it's invisible unless you know what you're looking at. He blended so perfectly, so unobtrusively, that it defied nature. My nape prickled. Worst of all, he had been sitting right behind me, and I hadn't the faintest idea he was there. I know you're behind me, I said quietly, my voice pitched within that range that's hard to hear in a busy place unless you're right next to someone. And I want to talk to you. I didn't see or hear anything out of the ordinary, but when I next blinked, he was there, sitting across from me in the booth. Even knowing he was there, my eyes still slid right off him, as though he were made of perceptual Teflon. His hair and suit might have been grey, or they might have been tan. Even memories seemed slippery, elusive. His features were a nothing. 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, a suggestion of stubble, but all was so ordinary that they refused to imprint as a definitive face in my mind. Come with me, he said, his voice barely crossing the space between us, unheard by anyone else. He didn't seem to walk so much as slide. It was so hard to keep track of him, even when aware of his presence. There was an impression that he walked, but I couldn't tell you if his legs actually moved, how fast or slow, how tall he was, his build, nothing. My eyes began to water as I followed him out into the street. If I blinked, I'd lose him. As people closed around us, he wavered and slipped out of existence, only reappearing when I focused so hard it made my temples ache. My headache grew as I followed him down one street, then another. I would swear his clothing changed several times, merging seamlessly with the feel of each suburb, always so perfectly ordinary for the particular surroundings that he was practically a piece of architecture. With every ounce of my keen powers of observation concentrated on tracking him, I realized I was suddenly lost in an utterly unfamiliar part of the city, which was impossible because we'd walked less than 2 blocks from the cafe. The man still moved ahead between 2 buildings. I hurried to catch him, stepping around the corner, and in an instant, I was no longer in the bustling, overcrowded city. I stood in a forest of towering trees, echoing with eerie birdsong not heard for 100 years or more. He did not blend here. Unnatural in the green paradise, the man stood out starkly. His pale features, city coat, and hat completely wrong in the rustling woodland. Where are we? I asked, spinning to see only gargantuan tree trunks in every direction, a distant glimpse of bright sky through the dense canopy of leaves far above us. A sanctuary, one I created. How did we get here? How far did we travel? We didn't. This place has been here for 50 years, right inside the city. I stared at him, bemused. How? He smiled, that ordinary smile again, bowing his head slightly. People simply don't notice it, just as they don't notice me. It bends their thoughts away, makes their feet take them in another direction, somewhere that is less boring, where they will be seen and remembered, somewhere that will cater to their ego and their desires. It's beautiful, breathtaking even, but why is it here? To preserve the best of your world. As he spoke those words, the mantle of his carefully practiced humanity slipped away. The being in front of me had skin as grey as its previous persona, so matte and uniform that the light didn't bounce off it quite right. There were too many forelimbs with too many joints. Where there should have been legs, a mass of red fungus-like fronds undulated obscenely, churning the leaf mold. I smelled the ancient and new all at once. There are too many worlds like yours. It warbled as I stumbled blindly away through the trees. Too many to count. A red mouth followed me, massive as a sea cave and bristling scarlet coral-like structures as the thing flowed effortlessly over the forest floor. Most of them we don't reach in time. An indigenous species can destroy so much in such a short span of ages. Once consciousness develops, it seems only a matter of time. I vaulted a stream, the water so clear it was almost invisible. Stumbling and scrambling desperately up the opposite bank, my grey skirt was splattered with moss and mud. Those oblivion grey arms reached for me, their star-shaped fingers filled with tiny red suckers. And your species is especially bad. As the alien hands closed around my wrists and ankles, lifting me effortlessly into the air, I whimpered a pathetic, selfish sound. I'm not going to kill you, the nightmarish mouth said. Then what do you want from me? I want to offer you a job. The cafe is quiet, and a man sits across from me in a neat grey suit. Not quite fashionable, but not quite out of date. He can't see me. He doesn't even register I'm there. He's too caught up in the feedback loop his cell phone has trapped him in, yearning for little red or orange icons to scratch the constant itch in the reward center of his brain. As the world shrinks, humanity slowly caged by the growing ecological sanctuaries until only one single city is left, nobody will notice. Like flies caught in an elaborately spun web of alien technology and psychological trickery, insects don't realize when they've been ensnared until it's far too late. Your selfish egos will remain completely fulfilled, and the walls of the zoo will be invisible. But there are other places that need our services when we are done here. Too many, in fact. Most of you won't even notice the title of this story. Caught up in your scrolling and your need for fulfillment, fewer still will read it, and those that do, most will forget about it in a day or a week. But a handful of people, maybe only one or two, will remember it forever. And to you few, when you feel your eyes slide off something when you're sitting in a cafe paying attention to not yourself, but to the others around you, say something. I'll be listening.